Welcome to Canada's Entrepreneur, where we talk to the entrepreneurs who are making it happen across Canada and deliver the news, trends, knowledge, and opinions from entrepreneurs and business influencers across the country. Hi everyone, I'm Phil Bliss, founder and CEO of Canada's Entrepreneur, and I'm coming to you today from Toronto. Stephan and Kimberley Lafreniere are growth-oriented and insight-driven senior executives with a track record of success in developing and implementing strategies and tactics to drive profits in the retail sector. They've both held progressively senior roles within planning, merchandising, and branding disciplines at iconic Canadian retailers, including Canadian Tire, Hudson's Bay, Loblaws, and Sears, some of whom are not there anymore, unfortunately. Kimberley has an impressive retail career after working for iconic brands alongside Stephan, Sears, HBC, but also Sobeys. In 2021, Stephan and Kimberley invested in Schooley Mitchell franchise. They went independent and became entrepreneurs. Schooley Mitchell is the largest independent cost reduction consulting firm in North America, with offices from coast to coast in the United States and Canada. And they were founded in Canada, actually in Stratford, Ontario. On average, they can reduce essential business services by 28%. And they've delivered over $540 million in documented savings to their clients. Stephan and Kim are passionate about saving money for their clients and helping them grow their business. Schooley Mitchell delivers expertise to companies of all sizes from all industries, offering a broad range of services aimed at reducing costs. All Schooley Mitchell fees are self-funded, so it's truly a risk-free and mutually beneficial business model. So welcome to Canada's Entrepreneur, Stephan and Kimberley. That's great to meet you all. And before we get deep into it, why don't you tell people a bit more about yourselves and your journey to date, if you like?
Sure.
Especially your entrepreneurial journey. Give us 2 to 5 minutes on that, and then we'll move into some questions about Schooley Mitchell, what you're doing there. Okay.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so I'm Stephan Lafreniere. I've bought my Schooley Mitchell franchise. We bought, my wife Kim is here with me. We bought our franchise back in October of 2021. So we're kind of in that 4-year plus mark now. It was a big decision because we've got corporate backgrounds. I'll let Kim explain hers in a second, but we both worked a career in retail. For myself, right out of school, started at Sears Canada, then went over to Loblaw, Hudson's Bay Company, and then most recently Canadian Tire. Unfortunately, 2 of those 4 companies aren't around anymore. It has nothing to do with me, but Sears was really kind of in the DNA of my family. My dad worked there for 32 years. He retired and then went back and worked for them for another 17 years. And I was there for about 13 years. So that's where I met Kim. Like I said, before buying the franchise, I was at Canadian Tire, where I'd been there for just about 8 years. Was a great company. Really enjoyed it. COVID happened. Corporate priorities happened, and so it was time for me to think about doing something different. And for me, I really wanted to explore something that was kind of adjacent, but really quite different to what I'd been doing in the past. Okay. Commuting, the big corporate environment, matrix organizations, were all kind of things that kind of got me to look into a different direction, and ultimately, Schooley Mitchell seemed to fit the bill for us. So
we'll cover a bit more. Kim, why don't you give us a little bit about yourself as well?
Yeah. So as Stephan mentioned, that I also was at Sears, so it was kind of one of my first part-time jobs. I was actually at Sears for over 21 years before making the decision to jump to HBC. So Steph and I have a very similar background, and in fact, for years worked in tandem at many of the same kind of organizations. I then moved into a bunch of smaller, more regional retail players. And kind of worked my way through management. I think one of the things that I learned leaving large corporate and going to more of that smaller regional player is just that it does force you to have that entrepreneurial spirit and kind of that ownership of the business, which is where I really thrive. And so, with this opportunity with Schooley Mitchell of being able to jump in and just kind of be your own boss, it really kind of met the needs.
Well, I think it's interesting, but I mean, from my perspective, I'm interested, why get a franchise? Both of you are perfectly, could have opened a retail outlet somewhere, just the two of you running it, and there's nothing much you didn't know about how to do that. So why? And you could have done that locally. So why step into a franchise as an entrepreneur? It's a question that a lot of people ask, really.
Yeah, when it came time to think about business ownership, we did a bunch of research, right? We tried to, what do we like to do? What are we good at? Because unfortunately, those things aren't always the same, right? Mm-hmm. As well as kind of really, I did a lot of reflecting on kind of what led me to where I was in 2020, early 21, and kind of what did I want to do in the next chapter. And for some reason, after working for those 4 retailers and for a couple decades, I was really focused on wanting to do something different. Mm-hmm. And that to me was also not retail, right? I looked at kind of traditional employment, but it wasn't, traditional retailer or e-commerce. It was more, possibly suppliers, brand owners, those kinds of things. But I was looking to do something different. Why franchising? It was honestly, someone reached out to me to network. It turned out, it was a franchise coach who spent probably 6 months trying to get to know me, and again, where my passions were, what I wanted to do, and there was a lot of exploration, and we started then looking at franchise options, and so it wasn't necessarily I'm going to buy a franchise. This is kind of the next step. It evolved into I want to try something other than retail. I mean, at that point, I guess I was just before 50. And I was thinking if I go back to another retailer, there's only so many chapters of this that are left to be written. And so I wanted to try and do something different. And the exploration ultimately led me to franchising into Schooley Mitchell. And I know we're probably not there yet, but Schooley Mitchell resonated with me because essentially what Schooley Mitchell does is category management. The categories that we do are very different than the retailers I've worked for, where I used to be a vice president and an associate vice president in businesses surrounding home products, kitchen products. And Schooley does category management on things like payment processing and telecom and waste. But it's for me, what connected was that category management approach to helping businesses be successful. That resonated with me. And so the whole franchise bit really was an kind of unintended outcome of trying to do something that was, for me, not traditional. And it just kind of a sequence of events led me to this opportunity that resonated. And so we ended up deciding to pull the trigger.
At Schooley Mitchell, we are here to help you grow. We are passionate about finding solutions that save your business time and money. Your success is our success. Go to canadasentrepreneur.com/Schooley for more information. Both of you can answer this, but Kim, maybe you go first. What do you like best about being an entrepreneur versus being an employee?
I think the biggest thing, honestly, is having ownership of your destiny. It's really, your business will be as successful as you're willing to put the work in. So, outside of a corporate environment where you're constantly dealing with a lot of red tape and it's very siloed, especially in the larger organizations where everybody has a very specific niche role within an organization. As an entrepreneur, you're always wearing multiple hats. And so really your destiny is your own to develop. And I think, again, just to highlight, being a part of a franchise, you're also not alone. I think sometimes what ends up happening is that when you're an entrepreneur and you're starting your own business, as a solo entrepreneur, you're kind of on your own and you're trying to make your own way in the world. The nice thing with Schooley Mitchell is you're part of a larger group of people who have done it ahead of you. And so you have opportunities to network, you have opportunities to gain knowledge and experience that you wouldn't necessarily get if you weren't a part of a franchise organization like Schooley.
Yeah. If I just...
You could extend on that, maybe from your perspective.
Just, I think more from a kind of a personal perspective, and this is not something that was planned, but something that kind of happened, that I was thankful that we were kind of in a place where we were working for ourselves, which created flexibility. But so we bought in the end of 21. In 22, my mother started to become quite ill. In 23, my dad was diagnosed with cancer and ended up kind of passing away very quickly. And then at the beginning of 24, my mom passed away, and in between, a very, very dear friend of mine passed away. And so there was a degree that this allowed us flexibility compared to, again, I couldn't have planned for it. It impacted the business, longer term, because obviously when you're taking time away for family, your business pipeline suffers. But it enabled me to spend time with, a very close friend and two parents that were kind of nearing end of life and then passed away. And so that to me was something that, again, while I couldn't plan, I was very thankful for. If I had been in the traditional employment, whether it was Canadian Tire or elsewhere, in a big organization, there's lots of pressures, and those pressures exist probably more so for the entrepreneur, but we are more in charge of our time. And it was a choice, and it was a difficult choice. And again, it slowed down our business development, but I was able to spend time kind of in a place that was very important for me, that was away from the business, to a degree, but without the conflict of, a big corporation and all the pressures that come with that, and teams and bosses and subordinates and processes that, would have, made the decision to spend time with close, friends and family a lot more difficult. So
Kim, and both of you can answer this one, but you start, Kim. I mean, so what's the biggest challenge you've faced in this 4 or 5 year entrepreneurship period? But you gave some of those challenges on the personal side, but on the business side.
I think the greatest challenge of an entrepreneur is understanding how to find that right client. Where do you go? Where are the resources to try and build that network? Networking, I think, is the one thing that when you're in the corporate environment, we really don't do enough of. And so we're not practiced. And so getting into a room full of people and truly networking in order to build your client takes practice and takes time to kind of become an expert in that. And I would say that's probably, for me, on a personal note, was probably one of my greatest challenges, of just overcoming that feeling of inadequacy around how do you ask for help? How do you ask for someone to refer you, et cetera? So for me, that was the biggest one.
Yeah. I think in the beginning, in the first 6 months of buying the franchise, one of the things that really stood out to me was all of the things that I didn't know. Yeah. Because you take for granted a lot when you're in a big organization and that organizational capability, right? I used to be, I used to have a big team. I was part of a bigger team. And if I had a question, I used to use this example. If I had an accounting question, Canadian Tire had a small army of people I could talk to. And then I become a solopreneur, and okay, if I have an accounting question, the resource around me is non-existent unless I pay. Right. And then like, how do you build that trusted network? And all of a sudden, things that I kind of took for granted come full force. And like, wow, there's so many things that I don't know. And again, the community of Schooley Mitchell franchisees, which I found out after I bought, was happy to see that are very kind of helpful, willing to partner, willing to share. Technically, we can be competitors because we can be looking for the same clients, but there is a sense of community that was helpful. And the networking groups, whether it's chambers of commerce or BNI, kind of helped as well. But initially, that was kind of the challenge, was all of these things that I took for granted and didn't even realize I didn't know. I think later on, when we were looking at franchises, very quickly, I knew that I wanted to get into a business-to-business franchise. I didn't see myself kind of having That's
kind of weird. You guys grew up in retail, which is B2C or as much as you can get. But why that? That was kind of
because when you did the kinds of things that we did, we were. Both of our careers led us to a place where, for me, my in-store time at those retailers ended in 1997. That's when I left the direct-to-consumer side of the business and moved into head office and the more, tactical to strategic side. My last role, I was managing well over $1 billion portfolio of brands. And so we're retailers and we exist to sell products to people. But we had left frontline selling a long, long time ago. And I saw myself as a business professional, not so much a salesperson. And so later in my career, in my time at Schooley, to be clear, the challenge I had was I didn't appreciate just how much selling there is to being a Schooley Mitchell franchisee. And we all, Dennis Schooley, the founder of Schooley Mitchell, when I was we were interviewing each other before, I bought the franchise. I said to him, I'm not a salesperson. I've worked in retail, which that may seem odd, as you just said, but I'm not a salesperson. And his response was, and it's true, accountants aren't salespeople, but they need to generate clients. And so, so we're not.
Of all people, he knows that. So
of course, yes. And so, fair point. But I think nonetheless, I didn't appreciate the challenges of, what it was going to be like to build a prospect pipeline, that turned into kind of really warm prospects, ultimately into clients. And, our model is around, we truly are paid on performance. It's the contingency model where we share savings. And so who would say no to that? If it was the dialogue in my head when I was evaluating the business. And what I've learned since then is sometimes people say no, sometimes they ghost you. Sometimes they may not trust you. And this would be true with any business, right? And I think it's the dealing with objection, which, academically, I can understand, but the artistry of that, I'm still learning. And I'd say for me, that is kind of the challenge today that I still face. I've gotten past that early challenge of, oh my God, there's so much I don't know about being an entrepreneur, to, keeping the pipeline full is one problem, but then getting people through that journey to actually say, yes, let's do business, and then be pleased with the result and want to refer us to other people, that whole, pipeline conversion, advocacy and whatnot, that part is still always the challenge, which is probably true for most business owners.
I'm interested, as a partnership in the franchise, do you take on roles? Kim, do you do certain things? Stephan, do you do certain things? I'm just curious.
Not really. I think both of us really, even though we kind of grew up in the same type of environment of the retail landscape, we have very different networks of business contacts. So it does allow us the opportunity to kind of go and do our own thing and bring forward different prospects into the Schooley Mitchell environment. So in many ways, we kind of feed off of each other's energy and skills and expertise.
I would say we have different strengths for sure. Mm-hmm. Kim is much more extroverted than I am. I can be quite introverted, but I've been in the business hands-on longer. Kim joined kind of after the initial purchase, even though we both own it. So I'm more familiar with the process of how we do what we do, but there's no question. And we used to joke that Kim was a great wingman when it came to kind of the earlier days, and we were networking. Even before Kim was directly involved in the business, she would come to me with those networking events, like the chamber mix and mingles, after hour stuff, and she was great at kind of the conversation starters and keeping the conversation going. As an introvert, that's harder for me. I mean, I do it, and I think I'm quite capable at it, but it comes far, far more naturally to Kim than it does to me.
Mm-hmm. So, for both of you, and if you could go back in time, maybe a decade or 10, 15 years, what advice would you give yourself then? I mean, is this leap maybe something you should have made earlier?
Yes, I would say the answer is yes. I mean, one of the things that I do enjoy is kind of we're the master of our own destinies, right? I've learned so many great things, at the retailers I worked for, and all of them in their own ways, whether they're here or not, iconic Canadian retail. But there's something about, building something for yourself, and, whether it be a franchise or something you start from scratch and you build over time, there's definitely, I think, an element of we're creating something that has some longevity for us. It's easy to say now, if I were to jump back what I started earlier and say yes, it's probably something I would hope that I could tell my younger self to do, and my younger self would listen. But there's also, when you're in a big organization, the constant paycheck is also nice, right? Long-term incentive plans, short-term incentive plans, car allowances, all of those things that they can be compelling and hard to turn your back to. That said, what we get out of this, what we put into it, and it's not something that anyone can take away. I mean, obviously, there's a license agreement and there are caveats in there, but we played the game right. We're bought into the process and the tools that Schooley Mitchell has, and so if we continue to put the effort in and are successful, no one can take this away from us. Where in big corporate, let's face it, everyone has some kind of shelf life, right? CEO is probably the shortest shelf life of anyone in a big organization. The lower you are in the organization, the longer your shelf life is. So we were VPs, and so we're somewhere in between.
So I'm interested, this isn't about Schooley Mitchell necessarily, but, does investing in a franchise organization help the risk factor of becoming an entrepreneur? Or I'm just curious, I mean, I haven't done it, so yeah, I don't really know.
I mean, academically, from reading, yes, it does de-risk.
On paper, it would.
On paper, it does.
Yeah.
There's, and again, this would be more of a question for Dennis, but people buy franchises of all kinds and don't stay with them, and so it's not a guarantee of success, but it does de-risk it. One of the reasons that Schooley Mitchell appealed to us, beyond that kind of similarity in category management and how it felt like there was a degree of our backgrounds that tied into what Schooley does, we really liked, especially frankly more so today than back in late 21. We love that it's a Canadian organization based in Stratford. We do like that we do business on both sides of the border, because we both have contacts in the US that none have become clients yet, but we do aspire to. But we really liked the Canadian kind of founded, owned, operated aspect of it. we also, when we thought about what the investment was, when you buy a franchise or you start a business, there's an investment that has to be made. But I would say on the Schooley Mitchell side, and don't tell Dennis I said this, but it's a relatively nominal investment compared to other options, right? Now, I get a lot of prospective franchisees, reaching out to me, asking questions. And one of the things that, I tell them is with Schooley Mitchell, it is naturally a slower burn, because when you buy a franchise, you typically aren't buying an established one. So you're starting with 0 clients. We are consultants. And so there's a process once you get a client that you have to go through discovery, you then go to recommendations, they have to adopt it and you implement. And so that slows cash flow. Right. And so there is one thing about this kind of business is that you have to have some patience. It's not like you bought, totally different price of entry, but you buy a Tim Hortons franchise. Tim Hortons is going to, help you pick the location, the corner to go on, and they're pretty astute at that. So the day the store opens, you're selling coffee. So you got cash flow coming in instantly. Now, you've got a ton of capital that's gone out. And so for Schooley Mitchell, one of the things that appealed to us, it was a big investment, but it was a nominal investment in compared to other franchises where you had real estate and other kind of capital investments you needed to make. And so, I think that to go back to your question, the franchise model helps ensure success, but it doesn't guarantee it. And this particular franchise does require that you've got, some financial ability to sustain the early period of time where you're really building the pipeline, filling the pipeline, before you start getting cash flow coming in. And so for us, ultimately, a stated way to say it, we didn't feel that this was going to ruin retirement. If it turned out to be the worst possible idea, we still felt we weren't ruining what retirement was going to look like. It wasn't the worst possible idea at all. I'm just saying that was kind of the mindset we had. The investment was workable without really disabling what we were trying to do with the balance of our life.
Okay. Kim, why don't you answer this one? Because you're I know you invested in this together, but you've only come into it,
recently. Yeah.
Recently.
Yeah.
What advice would you give an entrepreneur, looking to start a business, in terms of franchise versus this versus that? Because you're dabbling in other stuff as well. What advice could you pass on?
I think the biggest one is really understanding your network. So, and who you're actually going to be catering your business to. So depending on where your passion is, making sure you love what you do and where you want to drive that entrepreneurial spirit. So if it's something you're passionate about, then looking at the bigger picture. So what does your network look like? And from there, you can then determine, is this something I can do this on my own as a solo entrepreneur? Or is this something that really does require the community, such as a franchise network, in order to really kind of get it off the ground? I think really doing your research is the number one thing, as well as Stephan had mentioned about making sure financially you can kind of float yourself for a while. You know that it's going to be 6 months to 12 months at minimum before you're going to be in a position that you're going to be able to start, putting food on the table specifically from that new business that you're starting up. So making sure you still have that cash flow coming in, whether that's through investments, et cetera. So setting yourself up for success is going to be critical. But the biggest thing is love what you do. Be passionate about something and go after that. And it has to be about solving a true issue that is bigger than where you feel there may be. So as long as you feel that this is going to be something that's transferable to many different types of businesses, so that you're not so niche that it's going to be difficult to make a living doing as well.
Okay. That's cool. Okay, let's have some fun just as we're coming closer to the end. Kim, first, are you a morning or a night person?
Oh, I'm a morning person. 100%.
What about you, Stephan?
I'm a night person.
Yeah, it does make our marriage very interesting.
Yeah.
What book are you currently reading, podcasts are you listening to that you'd recommend? Apart from Canada's Entrepreneur, of course.
Yes,
Yeah, of course. I'm trying to remember the name of the title, but it kind of drives Kim nuts, and we have 2 daughters. It drives them nuts as well. But I saw on Facebook a long time ago a guy named Admiral McRaven, an American who was a Navy SEAL, and it was a commencement speech, and so he was talking about kind of his rules to be successful in life, and it started with when you wake up, make your bed. It's actually quite an entertaining listen. And so he's written a couple books, and it's kind of the lessons on management kind of learned from his time as, in the U.S. military. But he's incredibly articulate, and it's kind of, cheeky, and, everyone's gotten tired of hearing it from me, so I stopped saying it. But if you want to be successful in life, make your bed. So I do make my bed.
You do?
Yeah. Our bed.
Yeah.
I do that too. So, if you let's go Kim first. If you had to pick one word to describe yourself, what would it be, and why would you choose it?
I'm going to say communicative. And he's laughing. I am known for being very good at starting conversations, holding conversations. In fact, maybe a little bit of a chatterbox, but that's okay. I do feel that communication is my greatest strength. I love teaching. I love learning. I love bestowing lots of great information onto people, whether they want it or not. So I would say that that's probably the biggest word for me.
Stephan, what about you?
There's more colorful words to describe it, but I'd say particular. OCD, some might say a little anal retentive, but I'm very particular about how, I like things done, and it's, detail oriented, maybe to a fault. I think it's one of the early stories that we have way back in early mid 90s. Before we were together, someone had messed up the pen tray on my desk, intentionally to see my response, and I responded as expected, and Kim was there to witness the response. And so, yes, particular to a fault, probably.
What's keeping you guys up at night?
For me, it's the economy. It's, there's so much going on in the world right now. And I think, looking at the political landscape, not just in North America, but around the world right now, and what that's going to do. We have 2 daughters that are in their 20s. The thought of them ever owning their own house, how are they going to make it in the world with, how expensive it is right now? I think that for me is probably the biggest thing that I worry about, if for us as a family, for my girls and their future.
What about you, Stephan? Same or?
Well, of course, the same. But will the Leafs ever get a cup in my lifetime?
About time.
Not sure.
I mean, cause for concern on both sides. Obviously, one's far more serious.
Yeah.
It's probably for us closer to home, the kids, right? There's a lot of pressures in life, and, cost of living and opportunity. And, I think back, my dad worked for Sears for 32 years and then another 17 after. And I thought at a time that would be me. Right. And now I've worked at 4 different places and now a franchise. And I think that pace of change is accelerating. And so for our kids, they've had a bunch of jobs already, and what does kind of career satisfaction and longevity and all of that stuff look like for them? To me, it's a bit of an unknown.
Yeah. Entrepreneurship is the future. I mean, I think it's it's a changing world. It ain't the world we grew up in. That's
true. Yeah.
Okay, guys, that's about it. That was really, really interesting. Personal and good insights into the Schooley Mitchell operation. So thank you very much, both of you, for coming on to Canada.
Thank you for having us.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, that was really interesting. Great to meet a couple, a family partnership, if you like, that has made the move successfully to entrepreneurship after a long corporate career. Uh, it's a really interesting story and good to learn more about the franchise investment pathway to entrepreneurship. Once again, I'm Phil Bliss. Don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter on the website and subscribe on our YouTube channel as well, or in any one of the other major podcast channels. And if you're an entrepreneur and see this, go to the website and we'll have a chat. Thanks for listening to Canada's Entrepreneur, where you meet the entrepreneurs that drive Canada's economy. See you soon.